Thank you so much, folks. Could you please give a big round of applause for Sirius Quartet?
Good evening. Am I on? There we go. Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's really, really great to be here in Brattleboro. This is our first time as a quartet playing up here, and I had my first experience playing up here actually very recently. I was here about 6 weeks ago, also playing on the International Music Series, playing with an Italian violinist named Luca Ciarlo. Was anybody here for that show? Okay. So you've never heard me before. You've definitely never heard this group before. But I just want to thank everybody at the Latchis Theater for having us up here. When I came, I played with Luca at the pub, and I just immediately loved this place. And everybody has been so hospitable. And I thought, I had the guys coming up from New York. By the way, I'm the one non-New Yorker of the group. I live pretty close by in Northampton area. And yeah, all right. Western Mass, Western New England, all right. I had the guys coming up for a couple of shows. We're playing in Northampton tomorrow night, and we're playing in the Boston area on Sunday. And I've been really wanting to play up here with the group, bring the group up. But so I just, thought it was a long shot. But I checked in with Daniel. I said, hey, would you be interested in bringing us up here in about 5 weeks, which, for booking a gig like this is very, very short notice. And he was open to it, and him and John Potter, the director here, who, I don't know if you're here, John, but thank you guys for making it happen. They, have been nothing but amazing and setting this up. And it's so wonderful to see all of you here taking a chance on us, because as a relatively unknown group, especially when you're playing in a new town or city, you never really know what you're going to get. So it's really, really wonderful to see all of you here. And it's great to just spend the evening in this wonderful theater. We were just having a blast sound checking earlier. And it's great to be here. So our quartet is maybe a little different than the standard string quartet. We write and arrange all of our own music. That's kind of our MO. And thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we love all the standard rep, but there's already a lot of quartets doing that at a very high level. And we're all kind of curious and creative folks, and we like to mix things together, styles and genres. We like to mix improvisation together with written music. And so that's what you're that's what you're in store for tonight. So we started things off with an arrangement that I did of, it's an Orthodox chant that I heard by a choir from Belarus. And I just found it to be very powerful. And we decided to open with that, and we transitioned into a composition of mine called Echo Chambers. And both of these pieces are on a new album that we just released in January called Incantations. And a lot of what you'll hear this evening is from that album. And it's an album that we're really proud of, and it's an album that has a lot of kind of intense music in it. A big theme of the album was really kind of using music and writing music that kind of honored and paid homage to friends and family members that we've lost in recent years, and kind of using music to channel those feelings, the positive and the negative that come with that. And we're going to continue on with a composition by our violist, Sunjay Jayaram. This piece is called This piece is called Sahasranamam, and it is based on a Hindu chant that Sunjay grew up hearing. And it's a piece that we all love playing, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks again for being here.
Sahasranamam by Sunjay Jayaram. Thank you so much. Well, we're very happy to be here, and now it's my turn to talk. The next piece is a composition of mine. I spent some time last year in Senegal, and actually I stayed there for 2.5 months to study the music there, and I also went on an island in front of Dakar. It's called Gorée. It's the island where the most of the slaves were shipped from Africa to South America and to America. So this was very, I was shocked and to see all this, and it's also called the Gate of No Return, and it's the most western point of Africa. This island is the most western point of Africa. So I also stayed with in a Sufi village where they chanted every night, and these chants got into my system as a composer, and I wrote this piece. It's called Chant pour l'île Gorée, chant for the island of Gorée. And the next piece then is again from Jeremy Harman, our cellist. It's called At Sea. Have fun.
So this is a composition of mine that you're about to hear called At Sea, Scatter the Ashes. And I came up with the initial idea for this when the four of us were working on a cruise ship a few years ago, which was not a usual gig for us, but we were traveling down the west coast of Africa, and we had a stretch where we spent about 6 days without seeing land, which for me was a very new experience, still something I haven't repeated. And I was practicing in my little room with the window, the door open, you know, with the water right outside. And I recorded myself playing this bass line that you're about to hear. And when I listened back to the video, I really loved the sound of the waves and the water in the background. So I wanted to try to recreate that. And so this is At Sea, and this is sort of an elegy for my late father, who was a wonderful person and a jazz guitarist, huge influence on me personally and musically, and a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing today. So this is At Sea, Scatter the Ashes. Thank you. Thank you.
I guess it's me. Well, this is the fun part of playing in this quartet. There are always things that we can change spontaneously without feeling awkward. I love that flexibility playing with these guys. This next piece is a piece that I wrote during the pandemic, actually, to commemorate a friend of mine, a very, very dear friend of mine, Dong Hyun Kim. He was a conductor. We went to school together, who suddenly passed away during the pandemic due to some heart illness. He was one of the most faithful friends I've ever had. So I call this Farewell, Horatio.
improvising the set list. Not really. We don't do that.
All right. Earlier in the set list, I dodged having to play a piece of mine, but now we're actually going to do it. So, my apologies.
It's too good. We got it here.
But this next piece is one that I wrote for a friend of mine who unfortunately passed away quite young. And he was a violist like I am, and I really missed him at the time, and I was trying to make sense of his passing. And I'd like to say I'm a bit closer than I was before after having written this piece for him. So thank you very, very much for being here. And this is my piece called "You Can't Get Them Back." Thank you.
Can't Get Them Back by Sunjay. Yeah, so we're going to do one more. And I just want to once again thank all of you for being here. This has been a really nice evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've heard some interesting music. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, this was great. Like I said, you never know what you're going to get, especially when you go to a new town or new city that you haven't played before, particularly playing the music that we play. And so I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, open-minded audience. And we would love to come back sometime. So let's make it happen. I want to thank again the artistic director John Potter for having us, as well as Daniel and Pete for doing such a wonderful job. Thank you guys so much. Pete, Daniel in the sound, Pete on the sound also in the visuals. I wish I could have kind of do the owl neck thing and look back and see what was going on, but I got a taste of it during sound check, and it's nice to be here. And yeah, if you like what you heard, I think everything that we just played was off of this new album, Incantations. We have some CDs for sale. If you still do that CD thing, if you still engage in that archaic technology known as CDs, and if not, it's also available on all of the major streaming services. And we hope that you'll, maybe live with this music again. And if also feel free to follow us on the social media channels of your choice, Instagram and Facebook primarily. Sirius Quartet, Sirius. But we are quite serious, as you can tell. I wanted to just quickly introduce the members of the band here. So, as I said, all of the guys are now currently New Yorkers, but originally from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we've got Fung Hwei on violin. From Ravensburg, Germany, we've got Gregor Huebner, also on violin. From Columbia, South Carolina, we've got Sunjay Jayaram on viola. And from Kansas City, by way of Antigonish, Nova Scotia, I'm Jeremy Harman. It's been a pleasure. So we're gonna finish things off with I guess one piece that's not on the new album. This is an old one that I wrote for the group when I joined many years ago, and this piece is called Paths Become Lines. Thanks once again. I hope you have a great evening. Thank you so much. Fung, Hwei, Gregor, Huebner, Sunjay, Jayaram. I'm Jeremy Harman, Sirius Quartet. Thank you guys so much. I don't know. Do you guys want to hear one more? Oh, really? Are you sure? Okay. All right, I won't press my luck. Okay, thank you. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. You guys are great. I'm not going to say anything about this one, but I will say it's an arrangement of Gregor's, and I think most of you will eventually recognize what it is. How's that for vague? Okay, hope you enjoy.
Everybody, please, thank you so much to Sirius Quartet. This is the first show of their tour and the first time they've performed in Vermont. And I feel very honored that it is here at the Latchis. And thank you folks so very much.
Thank you.